Do you want to get married?
Yeah, I want to get married, but more out of necessity of like producing a male heir is really the whole point.
I love your face.
No, I'm just listening. I'm just observing. You can keep going. Continue.
She's like, we can keep going. No,
Because I mean, I would prefer to get a handle on what you think from your mouth.
That's very
before
Chinese
I
of
say
him,
anything.
though. Just only men, so he doesn't want any female children. It's very Chinese.
Yeah, no, I think they're awake on this question. I mean, as far as like marriage
it's
goes,
more about population control there rather than, getting
well,
rid
and
of women.
it's like the old world stuff about like a dowry and like, gendered stuff and all that. But, at least for me, it's sort of like a pride thing. Like I want to produce a male heir to take on my name, take on my legacy and all that. And, marriage is sort of pursuant to that goal. But, I don't know about this whole prospect of like living with a woman for the rest of my life. Like, it sounds good at first. It sounds like kind of fun or interesting. You don't have to do laundry. You don't have to worry about kind of taking care of the house. But, then the prospect of just like, it goes on and on and on. And it's decade after decade after decade. And, I don't know how thrilled I am with that whole idea. I'm kind of a solitary individual. I like my privacy. I like my autonomy. And just the idea of like nagging GF, nagging wife, it's a little nightmarish to me.
Do you have a good relationship with your mom?
I love my mom. Yeah, I love my mom.
Mm-hmm. Is your mom a stay-at-home mom? What does she do?
Yeah, so she works now, but when me and my sister were growing up, she raised me. She quit her job to stay at home and raise us.
And what's your
full
sister
time.
like? Do you get on with her?
Yeah, she's my twin. She's probably the opposite of me. She's more calm, sort of introverted. Yeah, but we get along.
Do you respect women?
Of course.
But you just don't want them to have any rights.
Well, I didn't say that. I didn't
Okay.
say they shouldn't have rights.
But if I'm understanding your question correctly, if you don't want them to vote or drive or have an existence akin to what they would have in, say, Saudi Arabia, you would say that in large part, then they don't really have rights.
Well, I would say probably the ideal is something more like Afghanistan, if I'm being totally honest. Like recent,
so what's the difference
recent
between
Afghanistan
then and Saudi Arabia?
like the brutality, I guess. It's like a little, slightly more brutal. Of course, Taliban rule, not American rule. I'm talking about, recent Afghanistan.
So you want women to have the same treatment as women have under Taliban rule in Afghanistan?
Something approximating that, yeah,
Okay.
because, you think about the Taliban and, what they're able to achieve. Here you have these guys with nothing but, some light arms and rags and 20 years, and they were able to defeat the largest military in history. I think that has something to do with the fact that they weren't, like, distracted. They weren't distracted with the kinds of things we are in America. They weren't being nagged. They weren't being bossed around by women. And, now they've got this society where there's this brutality, like I said, this old world sort of order. And you bring up like voting. I don't see really voting as a right, if I'm being totally honest. Like, it's not just women. There's a lot of people that really shouldn't be voting anymore.
Such as?
Maybe people that don't own property, young people that work like retail jobs. Like, as an example, really? Well,
No,
hear me
that's
out.
just
Hear me out.
funny. People that work retail jobs.
Well,
Okay.
or
I think
like
I think we
service
can all get
jobs.
on board with that national movement. It's like, with the service that you're getting, it's like, man, you couldn't even get my change right. I don't know if you're going to be able to pick the correct president of the United States.
I was in Lowe's earlier, and a young man helped me who's actually a fan of both of us, who was super lovely, and I would like him to vote. He was great. He was very clever.
Well, the thing about retail or these service jobs is like, you look at these young people, it's a lot of millennials, Generation Z, and they really don't know how things work. You know what I mean? Like if you own a business, if you own property, even if you're a homeowner, you kind of have an idea of like how things work, like where things come from and some idea of like how the economy works. And, if your whole life is like, okay, you're in school, you're a student, you pay rent. You know what I mean? Like you don't even manage like how your apartment runs. Like how should you have a say in how the country is run? You don't even really know how anything comes together in society. So, the old way in America was that it was, of course, propertied white men. It was a very narrow group of people that were able to vote. And that's because the founding fathers didn't really believe in mass democracy, universal suffrage. They believed in checks and balances, and kind of voting was a part of like checking the power of the ruling class or the regime with the power of the people. But they weren't under any illusions about this idea that like every person should have a vote. One man, one woman, one child, one vote. They didn't believe that. So, that's not how the country was founded. That's not how the system was set up. And that was for a reason. So I think it was a big mistake in the past 100 years to just open it up to everybody. We have to think about how we're going to have competent government and who's going to make those choices. And, we have to think competent people should be making those choices.
If I were to ask you, let's start with rights. Okay, let's start with access to something very simple. Let's go to an amendment. Let's go to 19th Amendment. Right? Let's start there. Let's just start there.
Gone.
All right.
Gone.
All right.
Day
What do you
one.
thought? All right. Day one gone.
It shouldn't be there.
I have a question though. Have you ever lived in any other country besides the United States?
Nope.
Okay,
Just
so
America.
when you talk about many of these things, these are just from an observational standpoint where you've done a lot of reading and observed a bunch of things.
Yes.
And then arrived at your conclusions based on that.
Yes.
But you have no practical experience living under, say, a more authoritarian rule.
No. Well, I already live under something like authoritarianism in America. I'm on the no-fly list. I'm being persecuted. The thing is about authoritarianism is it can't be condemned in itself, because the character of the regime isn't really authority. The authority is colored by the people that are in authority.
Not to interrupt you, sorry, but just to back up for a second. So you're currently on a no-fly list based on the authoritarianism that's going on in the country.
Right.
Now, that authoritarianism, you could argue, is from the left, and the left are very happy that they have that authoritarianism. So what you want is a right-wing authoritarianism.
Yes.
But your issue is with left-wing authoritarianism.
The problem is not authoritarianism. The problem is leftism.
What about the people on the left who think of you and go, well, I don't want to live under his rule of law? Because obviously there are people who don't think like you do.
This is
We're
the
not a
essence
monolith.
of politics. This is the essence of politics, is that there is an us and there is a them. There are right-wing people and there are left-wing people, and people have varying identities with different levels of salience. But yes, the problem is that we are not in control of the regime, ultimately. The problem is not the regime itself or power, because the thing is, and this is the problem, is that conservatives are sort of naive about power. Power, is not, we're not getting rid of it anytime soon. This idea of take over the government to let everybody go and free the people. It's there will always be concentrated, centralized power. And the question is, well, who's going to wield it? Are we going to forfeit the playing field to the left? This is essentially what conservatives have done because they're averse to rule. When conservatives get in control of Congress or the presidency, what do? Do they go aggressively like the left does and wield the bureaucracy and wield the Congress? Or do they kind of just, well, we're going to cut your taxes and we're going to do this and that. And then the left comes in with a vengeance and they say, we're going to use environmental regulations to take your gun rights. And we're going to use the IRS to go after conservative nonprofits, and we're going to do this, and we're going to solidify our rule, and then we are going to set the tone for the country. And conservatives then, even when Trump gets into office, it's what did we accomplish in the first 2 years? When we had Congress, we had the courts, we had the White House, we did a corporate tax cut, barely repealed Obamacare. It's about it. We should have built a wall. We should have went after the endowments for the universities. We should have targeted left-wing institutions. We should have opened up the libel laws and went after the media. So, conservatives just aren't playing the game. We've got to wake up to the reality of power politics, engage and play. And so back to the original point, the problem is not that there is power, that there is authority. There will always be authority. There has to be authority. The question is who is going to wield it? And, right-wing people have to do that, which is why I said earlier, if Trump became the Caesar of America, hypothetically, if he had got in 2016 and said, you know what, I'm not leaving, and the courts tell me that I have to leave, well, I'll disobey them, and he went full, Andrew Jackson, I would support it. I wouldn't say, this is authoritarianism. This is in principle wrong. I would say, this is the right man for the job. This is a rightful ruler of America, and and I would be okay with that.
You bring up Caesar, but didn't that end pretty poorly for them?
No, the empire.
The empire ended pretty poorly, I think.
Yeah, after hundreds of years.
Well, we've been around for about 400. How many we got left?
Well, I don't know. That's just it. The Roman Republic was around, and then it gave birth to a true empire ruled by a Caesar, and then they reached their zenith under the empire. So I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing in the world.
I just find it interesting though that you're promoting these ideas having not ever lived under them. I just find that that's such a, it's, it's odd to say, let's paint the entire house blue when you've never seen a blue house.
Well, I mean, do I need to go to Russia to...
Yes, probably.
Why? I mean, why?
I mean, I'll give you an example. A very good friend of mine who I've known for about 10 years used to be very much like you, actually. And he's someone who used to really, really prop up authoritarianism. He used to, and he still believes this in part, that people do need to be governed to a large extent because people, left alone are morons. And that's not something necessarily that I even disagree with. I think your average person is probably as dumb as a bag of rocks. However, he moved to Singapore, which you could argue is not the worst place in the world. Obviously, it's quite clean. People, follow the law. The crime rate is reasonably low. But after about 2 years of living in Singapore, where they knock on your door, and this has happened to him, where he got dobbed in by his neighbors for having water on his balcony, and they said it's causing a mosquito problem. Now we're at your house, prepared to fine you over mosquitoes. He said to me, I hate living in this country. I hate the authoritarianism here. I hate the way that things operate, because coming from Australia, he's an Aussie. He was like, I much prefer the way that we do things back home, or at least, the freedom that we have. And living in a country where that's staunched in some capacity was really, and is and continues to be, very bothersome and trying for him. And so I just find it interesting, though, that you've only ever lived in the United States. I just you can only do so much reading before practical experience actually should take, some sort of precedence. And I mean, I say the same thing about women too. I mean, I dare say, from my understanding of many of your viewpoints, you also promote like the way of interacting with women. And I go, have you been in a relationship with a woman?
No.
So how are you telling other people how to behave towards women when you yourself have not had any actual physical, interaction with them in a romantic capacity, or in fact, in any capacity where you uphold them in a way that treats them with respect? I mean, if you're out here arguing that women are basically half the value of, well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, in fact, because that's not right. But, if you are looking to some other regimes around the world that do think that women are half the value of a man, I have to question what kind of a person who's had no experience with women is in a position to basically promote these ideas.
Well, I'm having an experience with a woman right now, and I've had lots of experiences with women in my life, not romantically per se, but I've talked to enough women. I've been in, I've known enough women to know sort of what's going on. And I think any man who is observant enough, and honestly, like I said, we could go back to great geniuses. We could go back to people that have been in relationships. Like a perfect example is like the pickup artists. Have you ever noticed that pickup artists who have the most relationships with women and the most sex, what they say is that really with women, it's the same bag of tricks to seduce a woman or whatever. And I think that kind of tells you something about the nature of women, that, you go from woman to woman, and it's the same kind of like little tricks, little things you could say or whatever to kind of hack them and whatever. And I think that kind of says it all about their nature. So,
what does it say about our nature, Nick?
Well, it says that, they're not fully rational. I don't believe that, like men, they possess a sort of full rationality. I think that...
rationality towards what, specifically?
Well, rationality
just
entirely,
generally?
sort of objective. Yeah, I don't think they're capable of that. I think that, a male has a real impersonal sense of rationality and reason. I think that a female sense is far more personal. And that derives from the fact that women are made to bear children. Women are made with their wombs to bear children. And so I think their whole consciousness is basically... it's wrapped up, it's bound up in this idea that they've got to carry a child and then raise a child. And I think that the impersonality, rationality, objectivity suffers from this. But in any case, to get back to the original question, which is about experience, I don't think that I need to live in Russia to know that we would rather have right-wing people running America than left-wing people. I think that's kind of an asinine sort of thing, which people like to trot out, and they say, well, you haven't, we could qualify it with all kinds of things, but the way that we live in America is unacceptable. I mean, there's homeless people everywhere. The crime's out of control. It's a corrupt country. It's a failing country, and we want to have competent
countries, Nick, around
leadership.
the world that have right-wing leadership still have many of those issues, and in fact, they're exacerbated oftentimes by the governments that are in power. So, and I would say too, I mean, I think it's a bit of a straw man to say that what I'm arguing here. I'm not even arguing. I'm just posing questions, really, because I'm interested to hear your viewpoints. However, I'm not saying. I mean, I agree with you in the sense that we should have, right-wing leadership. I'd prefer to live under a right-wing government, so to speak. Although I am more on Eric's side of things these days, where I'm edging edging closer and closer towards anarchism. But, you know, I'm not suggesting that I would rather a left-wing government over a right-wing one. I'm simply saying, having never lived under the autocratic rule that you seem to be promoting in some capacity, I'm having a hard time understanding how you can say that this would be the best way to go about doing things when you actually have no practical experience. That's all
Where
it is.
do we see, I'm wondering
That's
right
all
now,
I'm
but
saying.
where do we see Christ-based, like, theocratic? I think isn't that more of what you're for, is like more like a
theocracy?
monarchy?
No, you're talking about theocracy.
No, but not necessarily just theocracy, but I'm just saying, like, in some way with authority.
Like Iran.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You mean like
I
the
mean,
divine right of kings?
But I'm
Yes.
saying that's Muslim. Yeah, but like a Christian version of, let's just say, maybe a Christian version of Iran, but not the exact government system. I'm just saying, like, where do we actually see that? Because I could just be sounding like an idiot here, but I don't know if we have any of that sanctified or left in its own original state of like a Christian autocratic type of rule. Do we have that? I don't know where we have it.
Not
Like
not
on a
in
large
this day
scale,
and age.
like
Not in this day and age.
like Poland, kind of, but not really. Like that's
It's
what I'm
more
saying.
like Hungary. More like Hungary would be more comparable because, you know, Viktor Orban, who's not perfect, but he's very good. You know, in Hungary, he articulated, I think a few years ago, he gave a speech at a university and talked about a new Christian nationalism in Europe as opposed to, you know, other forms of nationalism or other kinds of democracy, and articulated, and it's not quite, you know, what I'm talking about, a sort of autocratic rule inspired by religion, but it's a closer approximation of that. But you're right, we don't really have that. And is this a symptom of modernity? Is this liberalism? It's probably been, you know, 100 years since we've had any kind of meaningful Christian autocratic rule anywhere in the world. And, you know, all you have to look at is the experience of history. You know, this experiment of overthrowing the kings and overthrowing the gods, it's been a complete disaster. I mean, think about how Europe and America used to be 100 years ago. I mean, it's no contest compared to the kind of scum and degeneracy and the awful things that we see today. And all that we want is a restoration of that. And I'm a real conservative in the sense that I don't believe that we're going to get to heaven on this side of death, right? So I don't know that we're going to get to I don't know. We're not going to have a perfect society, but it's a question of what kind of a society are we going to live in? What kinds of problems do we want? Do we want to have the excesses perhaps of a Christian autocratic rule and sometimes the cruelty or things that come with that? Or do we want to live in the environment we live in now where mankind is killing itself? You know, people are not having children and it's sickness and depravity and children are being harmed and corrupted. I mean, I don't think it gets very much worse than where we are today. Outside of some exceptional circumstances in history. So to me, that's really it's about what kind of society, what's the character of the country we want to live in.
What I will say is that I agree with Nick on the sense that, yeah, when leftists get power, unlike what the conservatives do, they are full steam ahead. And they will punish their political enemies. They will rule over them. And I think it got that way, and that's just not really to my point, because of this long-term sort of infiltration process where they got basically hold of every single institution. And now we just kind of see it come into fruition more than what we've ever had because we can see it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Social media, technology, all of this connectivity. Where I differ is more so because I don't see the conservatives as, okay, wielding it and doing nothing. I think of it more as, to me, and maybe this is just through my lens, in that they ensure the power structure of leftists, and they set them up for success to then fuck us over. Let's call it what it is. And again, when I say punish their political enemies, I want to be direct and I want to be clear here. I see them as the direct enemy here, considering all the subcultures that I'm involved in, and they're controlled by leftists, and they've been running the bitch into the ground for as long as I've been alive. It's just been accelerated over certainly the last decade. But I would much rather, and going back to my original point of like pulling the rug certainly from under them, because yeah, I can understand that at least in our lifetimes, with government, it may be present in this geographical area. Is that going to be difficult to get away from? Potentially. However, I do think the scale of that can certainly change within our lifetimes. I do think that that's certainly achievable.
But I am saying that on the side note, you were noting because yes, we have special buttons and we can chat to each other on the show. Is that Sydney doesn't know anything about you, really. I mean, besides what she's heard on there. And she's like,
And I do want to say, like, I've said I do know many of your views on women, which I find abhorrent. I'm going to be honest. I don't agree with you in any capacity on that front for obvious reasons.
Yeah, figures.
But I actually went into this reasonably, like, not really knowing your broader, views on things. And so I don't really have an opinion of you, if I'm honest. And so that's why, I mean, it's really funny. People are like, Sydney's really triggered. And I'm honestly just sitting here just listening and just, getting a feel for things. But I was saying to Elijah, it's interesting. I think you're being very respectful. And I think that's really nice because people make you out to be this, assassin that's going to just stab everybody in the face. And I think you are being very respectful, and you're obviously very polite in person. But dude, your followers are very interesting people.
Yes.
And I find it interesting how you appear certainly one way in person. And I would say you're nice in person, and
Thank
then
you.
In the chat. I don't understand. Are you aware that your followers are like this?
Well, they're very animated, very enthusiastic. The thing is that the thing about our people, me and my followers, is that we are really oppressed in a big way. And so you really can't divorce this from how we are. I mean, when you take a look at my followers or groypers or somebody like myself, I mean, we really have been treated unfairly by society. And, some people say, hey, your followers aren't very polite, or, they're very rowdy,
I
or
think it's
something
more
like
than
that.
that, Nick, though. I think that they, like, for example, they attack Elijah personally. They attack me personally. I don't
there's
think
a phrase for it being called groiped, right? Am I
That's
right?
right.
I don't think that-
Got groiped.
I mean, you can extend this into other people who've been horrible to you personally, and that's completely fair. If they,
Right.
Want to go for them, fine. But if I'm just asking you questions merely to dig into your viewpoints, which I think is a fair thing to do on a show like this, I don't know why anybody would turn that into a personal attack. Now, I don't care. Like, do whatever. Like,
I think the word you're looking for is pieces of shit.
Well, I mean, it's just like I don't get it. Like, and if you do think you are oppressed, which is
Yeah,
is
but that's
fine,
what I'm getting at, is that's why there's sort of a defensive posture, is because,
Sure.
if you look at my experience and the experience of people that I know, it's, being subject to horrible lies and slander. And so,
But Nick, all of us
that's
are
how it
though in
goes.
this space. I
Yeah,
mean, like,
but not really
Elijah
quite on
apparently
the
is
same
a
level.
terrorist. Dude, the stuff that this kid's been exposed to, I mean, like, he's on the same level as.
But I
well,
did have a federal credential, so I got out. But I did get. I'm saying, like, did you read? I'm going to tell you this. Did you read how
Yes.
he got rid of his Twitter, his ADL
Yes,
expose?
I did actually. Yes, I did see that.
Can I just say this? So, like, I know you're explaining this, so I really am not trying to get in the way. But what is so interesting is that if you read the ADL thing, and you laugh at this too, like, I started to think about this of why Nick Fuentes is evil, right? So, like, because I know that this is what everybody does. And the first time I had to interview him, I got this whole email with all this shit I had to add before I introduced him. But it's like everybody's always like, oh, Nick's evil. And like the only reason why people think he's evil and like go on that is because the gatekeepers that hate him, people are afraid of pissing them off. Because when you really look into Nick's like life, people are like, but he's an anti-Semite. And so first of all, but people say this, right? And it's like, well, why? And it's like, he made this joke about cookies and the Jews. And I go, okay, I don't know about you, but I'm not a bitch enough to actually care about that. Like, I literally, the humor thing, like, it's like people always say, well, I wouldn't say that. I haven't said that.
What this is, but I don't know.
No, but
YouTube already hates us.
Yes, but I'm
and
saying, no, but I'm saying, like,
show me afterwards.
it's
and
like,
then
okay,
I can
so
understand,
if you
'cause
wouldn't
I don't know what that is.
No, but if you wouldn't say it, then just don't say it. But did you really think someone's evil because they made a joke? And then it's like, well, yeah, but you're not supposed to question that. And it's like, well, I come from the intellectual movement where literally you can question anything. And it doesn't mean that it's, that anytime someone's trying to say that you're immoral for asking questions, or clearly have bad motives, are ignorant, or a part of something, whether it's the pandemic or climate change, let people ask questions. And it's so funny because when I read the ADL defamation article about him, it was like 90% of the things that they said about him that were evil were just like normal mainstream conservative like ideas. It was like, he questions the election and he believes in right-wing authoritarianism, and it was like he believes the right wing should be the only wing. And then there's like the only part that's like probably different than the average person is that he's made inappropriate jokes on camera versus people have probably made similar jokes off camera. And I read it and I was waiting for it to be like, called for arms, called for terrorism, called for the Ku Klux Klan to be reinstated, called for lynchings. Like, I'm going through this article. It's so in depth. And it's basically the end of it was like, this guy makes bad jokes and he says sarcastic things. And he also doesn't know if Biden was there because of votes. And I like read it. I'm like, this is the worst hit piece on this guy. And then I realized but like she was saying, it occurred to me, go, why everyone thinks Nick is the worst guy in the world is because of the way his followers act towards people, and they can't disconnect. No, but I'm saying, like, they can't disconnect because they hear things about you that are exaggerated, but then they interact with, like, you get griped and they get these people, so they assume they connect it, like, Nick is just trying to, like, infiltrate and hurt my life. But when people meet you, like she did, she's like, this is actually not who I thought I was about to meet. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a polite, amicable. I'm a human being. I'm a human being. I'm a free thinker. And ultimately, my job is to provoke. Like, when I decided to do my show, I wanted to do something novel. A lot of people, when they were my age or even my age now, and they start a podcast, they want to start a podcast and they want to do like the Ben Shapiro show too. Like, I'm going to do a show and say the same things that Shapiro does, or the same things that, their favorite commentator does. And my idea was, well, I want to go and say what I think, my original thoughts, my thinking. And I think that it's so boring, the expectation that we're going to be in media. We're in this disastrous time right now, catastrophic time. And we're all supposed to go on here and just say, hi, well, great to be here. I love low taxes, and I'm a conservative, and all this kind of stuff. And, like, the idea of my show is, like, let's be provocative. Let's play devil's advocate. When I say things about, like, we should be more like the Taliban, it's partly joking, but there's also partly truth. And that's sort of meant to suss out and antagonize, interrogate the truth, and arrive at maybe, if we can think about the world in a different way, in a way that, maybe we don't think about it usually, in a way that some people think is abhorrent, maybe we could arrive at something more true, certainly something more interesting. And I guess that's the biggest problem is, I don't want to say that my whole life, of course, I'm self-righteous and I'm fighting for a cause, but a lot of it is just mischief. A lot of it's just fun. A lot of the things that I do and say, I do without thinking sometimes because they're funny, because they're interesting. It's like, what if we just run with this, like the Cookie Monster thing or whatever. I'm not the kind of guy that says, oh, no, we can't say that on this show. That is reprehensible, because we're all adults. We're all in this life, and I think you have to have a sense of humor about it. And that's just one of the things that they weaponize. If you have a sense of humor, if you have any degree of authenticity or realness.
Shapiro was really mad about that.
Well, he doesn't like it.
But to your point, Elijah, go ahead.
So hold on a second there. And sorry to shush you.
Go ahead.
I get what you're saying, like making jokes and being funny, or at least trying to get trying to antagonize people. That's one thing. And there's plenty of people who do that. Like, you're not the first person to try it. And obviously you're quite successful at it. But I would say, don't you think to some extent that polarizing people doesn't reach, if you really want to get your point across, and you really want to change people's minds, and you really want to push this agenda that you have here to push, because obviously you have strong feelings, and obviously you care about the trajectory of America, probably even the planet, and you do care about right-wing values, and you do care about conservative values. Did you think that perhaps to some extent polarizing people who otherwise might listen to you is maybe not the best course of action? Because obviously there are people who are going to love you regardless, right? There are people who automatically agree with you, who think you're fantastic, and a lot of them in our chat at the moment who really, really think you're wonderful. But then there's a bunch of people who might, warm to your ideas if you weren't saying, like, yeah, let's do this, that, and the other, things that they might find inaccessible. Like, I guess I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but, in my opinion, the truth is polarizing. When Jesus came, he said, I came to divide people. I came to bring a sword. I'm going to separate people in their own houses. And, I think this kind of equivocating, like, well, I understand your perspective, but, listen, I think this kind of equivocation that people does is actually doing more harm than good, because it obfuscates the real truth. And when I come on my show, it's raw, it's uncut, like the truth is. And I'm giving it to people, I'm delivering it to people, and they might not like it. Some people, I think it resonates very strongly, and they like that. The biggest problem is the people who are righteous in this country, I think, are too timid. They don't have the boldness. They don't have the courage to alienate people. Particularly with conservatives, they want to be liked by everybody. You ever notice this? Liberals don't care if conservatives like them. Conservatives really care that liberals like them, and they talk in such a way that they want liberals to like them, and they want women to like them. They want black people to like them. And you hear conservatives talk about race, and they're tiptoeing around it, very delicate, walking on eggshells, because we don't want to offend the black people. And same thing with women. Well, we got to be delicate about it. We don't want to offend the women. And, I think a lot of this is because of the society that we live in, where you've got to sell products to a mass audience of people from different races and different genders, and we live in a mass democracy, and you've got to win all the votes. But me, as somebody that is strictly an entertainer and a truth teller, I'm really unconcerned with the sort of popularity of my personage or my views. I'm about going in there and saying what needs to be said. And if people are influenced by that, and they want to go and play that game and equivocate, and they want to say, well, I think what Nick is trying to say is, they can go and do that, but I'm really more, to me, my concern is just getting that message out there and getting the truth out there. And people, I think, should be more concerned about telling the truth, being real, being raw, being who they are, than sort of overthinking it in this sort of self-conscious, like, how are we going to cleverly maneuver and strategize? Like, I'm just going on my show live every night and saying, listen, here's how it is. I'm independent. I'm a free thinker. I'm not paid by anybody. I don't have to worry about sponsors or whatever. And here's the real deal. And so that's my philosophy.
Alex Jones said something similar, but he also came to learn that the power of what he was saying influenced other people. So while you may be a little more rational and measured, it seems as though the following you have built doesn't understand when you're being satirical or you're making a joke. So do you have concerns that maybe they're going to ruin your message?
Not really, only because, I really have no control over what happens after I tell the message. And, once again, we can get caught up in
But isn't it your movement?
Yeah, it is, of course.
So shouldn't you have some sort of control as someone in favor of authoritarianism?
Well, I mean, I control like an organization, and I control the messaging that comes from me and from my show. But as far as like what my followers take from that, I can't control how people respond to it or how they interpret it. And I don't necessarily think that's the responsibility of an author or of a speaker or something, of a truth teller. That'd be one thing if I was like a politician or something, or if I was leading a club, if like my club member, if I was leading like, hi, this is the Groyper Club, members only, and some guy was out there saying, hey, you know what? And he was a representative of something that I led. That would be one thing. But, me going and doing my show, I don't even know who's watching it. It's a mass audience online, and they can take that and do what they will. And, the most that I could say is clarify my views where there's ambiguity or where people are taking it out of context. But, I think it gets away from the duty and the obligation in this time of people to tell the truth. The onus is always on the truth teller. We live in a corrupt society of lies and deception. And whenever anybody tells the truth, it's like, well, but that's offensive. Well, but don't you think that's not, really strategic? Or don't you think people are going to mistake that and take that out of context? It's like, I'm more worried about the fact that we're in this empire of lies, and we got to tell it straight up and to some degree have faith in the message and have faith in people that, it's going to go and do what it needs to do.
I'm interested why you say that you and your following are oppressed.
Well, I mean, just take a look at what's happened to me in particular over the past 5 years. I mean, I'm probably the most censored person in America or in the world. I'm so thoroughly banned. I talked about this on Slightly Offensive. You can't even search my name on TikTok. Like, I'm banned from TikTok, and you can't search Nick Fuentes. It says that's a hateful term. I made a music playlist on Spotify for the summer. Songs, Miley Cyrus, Radiohead, whatever. And they banned the music playlist because I made it. I'm banned from Twitter, Facebook, every social media. I'm debanked. They closed one of my business checking accounts last week. Didn't even tell me. They just sent the account balance and a check in the mail. I logged into the app. Your account doesn't exist here anymore. I'm on a no-fly list. And then you add to that.
They took your money. The feds took your money, too.
Yeah, and then the Fed seized $500,000 from me earlier this year. So, it goes on and on. And it's also in the conservative movement. Like, I'm also on the blacklist for CPAC. My name is on a list at CPAC where I can't enter.
It's whatever. They're gay.
Yeah, they suck.
They suck.
I'm not really
I'm just
missing
gonna put it out
anything.
there.
Going party with Lady MAGA
The people
and
who run
Caitlyn Jenner.
CPAC, I don't know.
It's a
Blaze
Eric's
Market-
wet dream.
What?
A weekend with Lady MAGA.
No, not interested.
Your face is just so.
He's like, I was gonna say, like, it actually makes me laugh because this is actually the true statement. Is that's why when you actually listen to Nick, not just the out of context, it's like you listen to someone like Eric, and it almost sounds like the same thing. I mean, obviously, with different, like you said, different variations of the right wing, so slightly different. But it's like, it is true though. This is why sometimes it's like sucks to be a white commentator. The shit you can get away with when you're black, like it's like literally. Sav was just like on the show, like I get in trouble, get a strike, anything like I'll say anything. something. And Sav was just like on the show. She's like, you know what? I am a bigot. I am a homophobe. I don't, there's like a couple gays I like, and overall, I'm just done with these people. And I was like, literally would get a strike if I was like to make that claim. But Sav is like, someone's watching, like, little brown woman. It's okay. You're oppressed. You can say what you want. And that's like the funniest shit. It's like, even when you go on, like we were talking about that, like the black people on Twitter talking about genociding the white population, and then it was like that just stayed online. It was like, all right, whatever, that's completely cool. Like, even I have a video playing that on YouTube, and they're like, that's cool, keep that one up, it's on this show. And then if you mirrored that, like if you're a white guy and you just like say half the shit that Brandon says, like Brandon just says stuff, I'm like, all right, we can get in trouble for this.
Apparently
just on
not.
that. No, but it is.
Oh, do not
but it is
tempt fate.
But no. But what I was gonna say is like, this is what's interesting is that like with Nick, it's that.
No, but I still want to know why the audience is oppressed.
That's what I'm
Why
saying,
are they
though. Wait,
oppressed?
that's what I'm saying about the oppressed thing is that the attacks, like we were talking about this, that you are a target. And once they choose that you're a target, then they'll just do everything to make an example of you. And that's what I think the oppression was, is that it's like, look, Nick made some Jew jokes. He has some opinions on Israel, and he said the N-word on his show. So we're going to make sure that everyone sees that if you step out of line, we're going to use this guy as an example, and we're going to say the Groypers are the equivalent of Nazis. And now it's like, even if you're black or you're a Jew or you're a part of it, doesn't matter. If you're a woman, it does not matter, because we're going to make this group the example. And so we'll take away every part of your humanity to interact in life. And they use these people as examples. So it doesn't matter if Eric said the same thing that you said, you're going to get in trouble for it, not him. For whatever, it doesn't even matter if you're white or male, whatever you can say, simply because now Nick Fuentes is the target and the example and the scapegoat on the right wing, even like where his name's like a curse word, where people, people told us we're retarded for having him on the show, as if it's like bringing someone on. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna like bust into flames or something like that. Like, who gives a shit?
Well, at the end of the day, I feel like if there's ideas, right, that Elijah has that I disagree with. There are ideas that actually I don't really disagree with a ton of your ideas. You're pretty good, Eric.
I like you guys.
Eric, I like when you're here. I sit here just nodding. But no, there's things that, you know, as people even on the right wing, we all disagree amongst ourselves. And it's funny because, yes, do I think some of your ideas are not my favorite? For sure. And I would hope that they would never be enacted, because I think that they would be disastrous in practice. But that's okay, because they're not in practice as yet. But the thing is that I've never understood this entire deplatforming and depersoning thing, because at the end of the day, the reason why I'm prepared to ask you questions and legitimately just hear you out, because like I said, I had no basis of who you were until just now, is because if you've got a shit idea, then we can shoot it down with a better one. And vice versa. If I have a shit idea, you can shoot it down with a better one. Fine, fair enough. But I am interested. I get when you say oppressed, and the fact that you have been depersoned, I think is disgusting what's happened to you. And I think it's disgusting what they've done to Laura Loomer. I think it's disgusting what they've done to Milo Yiannopoulos, because again, if you have ideas, shoot them down with better ideas.
Benjamin.
There's tons of them. Yeah, there's tons of people. The fact that like even when Chase Banks started just closing people's accounts, they did that to Laura Loomer. It's revolting to me.
I remember that started a lot of that. Like
I'm
James
banned
Alsop,
from,
they got
from
too.
Yeah.
Uber, and that is very annoying.
Yeah.
That is
sucks.
very annoying, being banned from frickin' Uber. I'm just like, that's the only place I'm
Where,
banned.
what are you all banned from?
But
How
I
many
want to
things are you
know
banned
why
from?
your audience is
Literally
oppressed.
everything.
I
Why
wanna
my
know,
audience?
Why
Well,
are they oppressed?
Because, you know, first of all, we have attitude. You know, we've got grit. We're real sort of like Groypers with attitude. I think that's kind of what people like about us. You know, firstly, I'll just say, you know, some people say, oh, well, the Groypers are too antagonistic. I think that's the reason why people like them, because we are energetic. We're not like these baby conservatives that are, you know, they show up to these college Republican meetings with like their pocket protector and they're like, I really like Josh Hawley and I like common good originalism. And Groypers are like, you know, it's America first, bitch. And like, we like that. But the reason why they're oppressed is these are young guys. These are young, virile, like in many cases, teenagers, 20-something. A lot of people think they're mostly white. There's a lot of Hispanics. There's a lot of black guys. They're mostly guys. And, you know, their whole lives, they have been oppressed. They've been oppressed by, you know, their parents, their libtard parents, if their parents are divorced, or overbearing moms, oppressed by the education system, oppressed by the media. Everything's been taken from them. Their movies, their video games, the women have been alienated and turned against them. Everything's been taken away. And you know, the big problem, I think where the antagonism arises from, is then you've got this conservative establishment, which is not, I wouldn't say it's the people in this room. I don't see a lot of establishment in this room. But, you know, when you see a lot of these pundits or people on Fox News, excluding, of course, Tucker and other places, they sort of talk down to these people and tell them that the real solution is something like, learn to code, get a job. Men just aren't doing their part. Like, for example, when it comes to the women conversation, it always comes back to, men just aren't good enough. You need to put down the video games and stop doing this and and it turns into this sort of nagging thing. And so the reason why my followers particularly are hostile to the conservative establishment, it's sort of like, we're in dire straits, young men, and the people that supposedly represent our side don't represent us and don't appreciate us and are not really talking about our real problems. And that's where a lot of the antipathy comes from. And I'm sort of like an avatar of them. I'm like them. I'm of them. I'm just another one of these Zoomers, just more talented and a genius. And so they see me as like, as an avatar who has been, I've thrown myself into the machine and people see what's been done to me. And it's sort of like they feel it. They see it, they relate to it, and they feel it. And so it's sort of like me. It's like I'm Joker, in like that movie.
But again, I guess my thing to
You mean the Joker?
Yeah, Joker.
Sort of like I was saying before, though, I mean, take someone like me, for example, right? The way that I got into politics was through men's rights. And that's something that I really care about because I love men and I care about them being treated fairly, particularly in, the court system and particularly when it comes to fatherhood and what have you. And I really care about that. And these are things where back in Australia, I've had marches. I've contributed a lot of money to the issue. Like I've done things that I think might help push the envelope. And I talk about this a lot on my channel. With some of your views, again, you might alienate a lot of people who would otherwise be ready to support you and your followers. And if you are oppressed like you think you are, then you are alienating particularly women. There's so many women you don't realize who really, really wants the best for men. And I simply don't understand this, let's sort of push women to maybe the corner in some capacity. When, like, again, otherwise people like me and other anti-feminist women are like, yep, cool, like, let's fight for men's rights because we care about that.
Yeah.
I mean, is that not problematic?
This is problematic. I mean, this is why I have to be the way that I am, because I break the mold. If you want to watch a show that what you're asking for is pandering. If you want to show,
I'm not.
You kind of are.
I'm asking you, is it not? No, because framing is everything, right? You can promote an idea that might be inaccessible to people when you say, yeah, we should just cut all the tails off the cats. And people go, no, that's animal abuse. That's a horrible idea. But if you come at it, you go, look, it actually helps with this, that, and the other, and you actually provide reasoning for many of your viewpoints. People go, okay, that's actually not so psychotic. Yes, I can get on board with that. But if you're like, yeah, women, this or I actually, because again, I don't have any sound bites from you saying things about women, so I'm not going to put words in your mouth. But if you do have some sort of bizarre opinion towards women that might not be based in reality, but rather from, I don't know, maybe a negative experience, maybe trauma, I don't know what your background's like. And I'm saying, like, maybe there's some issues here that need to be unpacked.
I have a good example
especially
of this.
For, some of your audience. I'm assuming that they've not had particularly nice experiences in life so far. But rather than, going into the world being angry and trying to bash people because they don't 100% align with you, I don't understand how that's pushing the envelope or helping anybody.
But that's not it. We're not bashing people because they don't align.
Do you read the stuff that your people say? And they make it personal, too. They're not saying you've got a shit idea. They attack you as a human being.
See, this is what I'm talking about. It's just sort of like this, like, don't you think that's problematic? Like, don't you think women like me are? It's like, listen, we don't have time for political correctness. We don't have time
it's not about
to
being politically correct. It's
pander
about
to the
demonizing
feelings of women.
50% of the population.
We're not demonizing them. Listen, we're more
Do you
based
read your own comments?
than anybody.
Do you read your own comments?
I read my comments.
So
yes.
you're aware of how these people feel about women. And women's just the example. I'm sure that they have shitty opinions towards a myriad of other people.
I want to cut in here and say this. This is actually important. This is what my wife noticed. She's a good woman. She stays at home. She doesn't want to work. I think she's she's what I wanted in a wife, right? I think that's kind of actually what you said, looking for a woman. Like I always joke.
No, just wants to make a bunch of little children. And
but it's
he
like,
wants to do the Epstein thing. No, he wants to do the Jeffrey Epstein. He just wants to clone him.
But like I don't really think that men and women were like really made to be friends.
Maybe in a couple of years, Nick, you'll be able to just drop your sperm into a thing, and then a baby will be.
Honestly,
no women required.
You can do that already.
Much better, yeah.
Yeah, I'll say, but my point was what I thought was interesting, especially with like young dudes, is I went to a convention for the American Populist Union in Florida. And what was interesting was these are just a bunch of young dudes. One thing that my wife noticed was that because she had just stopped by to bring me something that I forgot in a piece of sound equipment or something like that, is that she was saying that while she stood there was that the young boys seem to be they seem to be anti-women or bitter at women rather than like, hey, I'm going to actually, like you said, like I'm going to live a society where I'm going to make money, and I don't believe in egalitarianism. I don't think women and men are traditionally friends in the way that society says they are. And I don't think that husbands and wives have to be friends in the way that you think they are, and that there's a place for women. And even traditionally when couples hung out, the men hung out together outside and barbecued and did whatever they went to the gentlemen's clubs, not the current strip clubs, but like actual male spaces, and women had their own female spaces. And there was this together but separate, ideology. And she was saying that she just goes, I'm just nervous, right? As a woman, that like, rather than men trying to become strong men that would attract a traditional woman who wants to stay in her place, that it becomes a movement, like she was saying, that is just about being it comes across anti-woman, not pro-traditional woman.
Right.
And that's all I think she's trying to say. That's I thought it was a fair observation from my wife of like, not that they need to create the space, or a car is for driving. They don't need to have women in here. They don't need to invite women. They can ban women. Who cares? But she was just saying that like a lot of these young guys she spoke to were just like, haha, shut up, bitch, you're a woman.
Yeah.
Rather,
Yeah.
which is fair if you're like 21, but when you're like, when you start to get older and, you want to reproduce.
When you're
and women
mature,
have
you're
a-
like, quiet, bitch.
You think-
Excuse me.
well, but I was saying that you actually take the authority and not just like say you have it. It's like you live it out in your real world with your wife, and you actually provide her the home, and you give her the place and the position to be in her place type of thing. It's like, well, women should be in their place. Well, your job is to provide that place. Like, we're supposed to marry them and give them the home so that you wanted them to stay home. Well, who's giving them the home? It's a man who knows what the fuck he's doing. So like, it's like, I see that instead it's just like, well, women need to be somewhere. Well, what? Where are the women going to share? Your bedroom in your mom's house? Where are the women going to, you want them in the kitchen? Which kitchen? Who's giving them the kitchen? And like, that's what I worry about too with some of these like younger movements, is it's very based and cool, but not always based in reality.
Yep.
No, I think it is based in reality because, again, it's all contextual, which is to say that, look at the society that we live in, which is like this insane, shrill, shrieking, feminist society. And it's within the context of this where my show is a place where it's like men talking about women, how we really feel, not pandering to them like they're a voting block, not pandering to them like we necessarily need their approval or need to win them over or something. My show's a show for men. Politics, in my opinion, is really it's a domain of men. And I'm speaking to men politically on the nature and the role of women. And the sort of attitude towards
But
women
Nick,
is,
you don't know
but see here, can I finish
Of
here? I mean,
course, yes.
I've heard this now.
Yes.
The point is really to sort of tell men about the place of women. And you're right, Elijah, men need to put women in their place, but first we've got to destroy this pedestal that women are put on by honestly both like feminists as well as simps, because there's sort of two sides to it. On the one hand, you have these like male feminists that say like, oh, women are the same as men, and like, hey, you go, girl. If anything, I'll be the one in the kitchen. And then you've got these simps that are like, m'lady, she's more pure than me, she could do no wrong. And it's like, well, let's think about how ancient people thought about women. Let's think about how people hundreds of years thought about women. They didn't idealize them. If anything, in the 19th century, they thought that women were more promiscuous and women were more sort of primal and animalistic and less rational and these kinds of things. And they didn't see women as like divine, the best thing in the world. They saw them as like, they reproduce, and then that's kind of their play in society. And so my show is with the mind towards basically destroying this feminist frame. And that goes for the whole thing. People come to me and they say, you're alienating people, it's provocative, it's whatever. And that's really sort of intentional in the sense that it's everybody has this liberal, feminist, sort of anti-white frame. And, my show is offensive. It's more than slightly offensive. It's very offensive.
That's why you're not on Blaze TV.
That's right. That's why I'm on Cozy TV,
Yeah.
not YouTube or DLive. It's with a mind towards destroying the frame. And, I don't know that, like, if I were the president, I wouldn't be saying, shut up, bitch, from the Oval Office. But the point of my show is to really change the whole conversation and change attitudes. And so I don't even have it in mind of, like, gee, what are women going to think of this? Like that. If I were to do that before my show, it wouldn't be the same show. It would be cringe.
But neither of us, Elijah and I do this every day, right? And neither of us, when we talk, think, is this going to offend women? I mean, neither of us think about, is this going to offend men, or is this going to offend black people, or is this going to offend... No, we just
We definitely
say
have to think
things.
about what we say more than he does, though, I will say, because, like, this, too, is, like, because you stream on multiple platforms, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that sometimes like where you can take things further than people think you can take them, but you also know like the 5D chess thing, kind of like, I mean, clearly if you become too hot of a target, like eventually like you get a strike and then you have to chill for a second because you're like, I got to chill for like a second
Cool
and get
down
the
timer.
heat off and then move in that position. But like Nick's in a position, which I noticed, is that he's got nothing else to lose except maybe being put in prison or being shot.
Well,
Yeah.
but
Which
to,
is like
to,
slightly different.
to Sydney's point
True.
a little bit though, Nick, how is that attitude any different than what liberals are currently doing to the right? In that they're saying we don't care if we offend them, we don't care if we alienate them. We want to institute what we want. We want to break down the nuclear family.
Yeah, well,
we want to
liberals
put
are
in
winning.
our structure.
Liberals are winning.
So you're saying they have a winning strategy. You think that's something we should emulate?
Yes, not in the sense of the content of what they say, but in the strategy. Yes, liberals. I should say, like Democrats are alienating voters with some of the stuff that they say, but yeah, liberals go out there and they say, "Here's our worldview." Like, we don't care if this offends. Like, how about Seth Rogen and Sarah Silverman? They're putting out this abominable Christmas special. It's just the most Jewish thing you've ever seen.
19,000
hated
dislikes.
it. Yes,
on,
and
YouTube.
no, it's more than that. It was like over 70,000.
No.
Yeah, 72,000.
Okay.
And they turned off the comments and turned off the likes because all those Eric
Seth
was
Rogen's
writing
unfunny
YouTube
and fat.
but telling them how much he was upset about the dislike
put it out
attacks
there.
that were happening.
Yeah, that's a
You saw that
retarded-
though, right? Like how they
Yeah,
came
yeah,
into the
yeah.
defense of that movie because it was like elves flashing Santa or some bullshit, and he was like,
Yeah.
"It's disgusting. It's weird. It's also weird too. Like cartoon porn is a weird thing."
Yeah, it's repugnant. But the point being is like, not that we should emulate that. That's sickness. But it goes to show the sort of brazenness. Liberals, I hate liberals. Oh, I hate liberals so much. And I'm not liberal. I'm not a classical liberal. I'm not a left. I'm right wing. I'm illiberal. I'm anti-liberal. But the way that they approach this is they're like, we want the moon and the stars. We're coming for your kids. We're coming for everything. We are going to dictate how society goes. And conservatives are sort of like, well, what's your point of view? Well, let's reach a middle ground. Well, and like that attitude is just, it's lethal, because if we believe that like we're in the struggle of good and evil, then there can be no quarter for evil. There can be no quarter for these
Yeah, but
sort
what
of like,
about people like me who think that some of your views might... I wouldn't say evil. That's not terminology I would use. But what about people like me who are on the right who think I don't like...
but are you on the right, really?
Yes.
What would you say is right? What would you say is right wing? What would your
I
definition
think you need to be
be?
more specific.
What is right wing to you? Say you're right wing. What does that mean to you?
Well, I certainly don't align in really any capacity with the other side of things. So where does that leave me?
Well, I mean, to get back to the origin of the term right and left wing comes from the French Revolution and the National Assembly.
aware.
For people that don't know, the supporters of the monarchy on the right and the liberals are on the left. And it gets to this idea of preserving the old way of doing things. What you're talking about, which is, yeah, go ahead.
No,
You
sorry.
got to jump in, yeah.
No, it's all right. You
It's,
keep going.
like not the left is not really sufficient. It's a very sort of specific thing about hierarchy, authority, about differentiation, which is something you were talking about earlier, differences between groups, between the races, between the genders, these kinds of things. And so I don't necessarily know, and I'm not saying this to be antagonistic, but I think it's presumptuous to say necessarily that we're 100% both right wing or on the same page or have the same definition of right wing. Because you say, well, I'm right wing and you're alienating me. And it's like, well, I would
I never
contest
said you were
that.
alienating me, but I would say I disagree with a number of your views, and I would hope that they would never come to fruition, is what I hope. But,
Yeah.
I mean, it's to say that this is why I don't call myself a conservative, because by many definitions of the Puritan conservatives, if you don't 100% fit in their framework of what they deem a conservative to be, then you are not a conservative, and they will X you out. Fair enough, if that's what they want
You
to
become
do.
a California conservative.
Yeah.
I heard that's really popular these days.
So, I mean...
It's a callback.
It's, I mean, I don't know how to answer that question, because I think you need to be more specific when you ask it. But if there's no better term. I mean, you want to come up with a better term for me, fine. But I would say that, believe it or not, there's probably a multitude of things that you and I align on, but obviously the big ones we don't. Or several of the big ones we don't. But this is to say that, I mean, just because I'm not a conservative doesn't mean in some capacity that my views
Trying
are.
to say, are you quiet because you agree, or are you just listening?
No, dude, look, I'm not the one to. I don't get. Y'all know how I operate. I don't fucking get offended at what the fuck someone else says. Definitely because I don't. There's no identity crisis suffered here. I know what the fuck I am.